Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to dive into, so let's get started. My name's David, and for a long time, I believed I had a strong marriage. Not perfect, but solid. My wife, Emma, and I had been together for years. We had our fair share of ups and downs, just like any couple, but we always managed to work through everything. At least, that's what I thought. But looking back now, I realized that while I was holding on to the idea of our relationship, Emma had already checked out. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was the little things. She stopped doing the things she used to do. Life can get overwhelming, and people go through stress. I get that. But this wasn't just stress. This was something different. People don't just wake up one day and start treating their spouse like a burden. Changes like this don't happen without a reason, and I was determined to figure out what that reason was. She started coming home later and later. Every time I asked where she had been, her answers were vague, distant. Just out, she'd say, barely glancing up from her phone. When I asked, out where? She'd roll her eyes or sigh like I was bothering her. That was new. Emma was never like this. The woman I married used to tell me everything, sometimes in excruciating detail. Now, I was lucky if I got more than a one-word answer. Then came the phone. She was always with it. If she was in the living room, it was in her hand. If she got up to grab a drink, the phone went with her. Late at night, I'd see the screens glow. I'd ask, who are you texting? And she'd say, just a friend. When I asked which friend, she'd snap, why do you care? One night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I turned to her and asked, Emma, what's wrong? Why have you been acting like this? She didn't even hesitate. She just exhaled sharply and said, if I had something to say, I'd say it. Let me sleep, please. That hurt. A few days later, my worst fears were confirmed. I got a call from a friend who was blunt when we started talking. Hey, I don't want to be that guy, but I think you should look into Emma. I saw her with another man, and they didn't look like just friends. I was speechless. My first instinct was to deny it. No, not Emma, not my wife. There had to be an explanation. But then I thought about how she had been acting, the distance, the secrecy, the late nights, the locked phone, the attitude shift, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't coming out of nowhere. I wanted to believe my friend was wrong, but deep down, I knew he wasn't. I could sense something was off with Emma, but knowing it and proving it were two completely different things. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't talk her way out of. And for that, I had to start with her phone. Emma had always been protective of her phone, but lately, it had escalated to full-blown paranoia. She kept it on her at all times, whether she was in the kitchen, the bathroom, or even just stepping outside for a moment. It was always with her, and when she was using it, she angled the screen away from me. That alone was suspicious. But I needed more than just a gut feeling. One night, I finally got a small window of opportunity. She had left her phone on the couch while stepping into the bathroom. My heart raced as I reached for it. This was my chance. I swiped up to unlock it, but dead end. The password had been changed. I tried the old one just in case, but it was no good. My stomach knotted. Emma and I had never kept our passwords from each other before. This wasn't just a coincidence. That was the moment I knew. She was hiding something, and whatever it was, she didn't want me to see it. I put the phone back exactly where it was and sat there, processing everything. If Emma was cheating, she couldn't erase every trace. People slip up. When they get comfortable, they get careless, and that's when they get caught. If I couldn't get to her phone, I'd have to take a different approach. I needed to see it with my own eyes. A few days later, I got my chance. Emma told me she was going out to grab something quickly. No extra details. No mention of who she was with. Just vague enough to set off my instincts. So I decided to follow her. I waited a few minutes after she left, then grabbed my car keys and drove out, making sure to stay far behind so she wouldn't notice. I followed her through a few streets until she pulled up to an unfamiliar house. She got out and walked right to the door, knocking like someone who had done this before. The door opened, and there he was. A guy I had never seen before. As if I knew this was coming, I had my phone ready to take pictures of everything. The guy didn't seem surprised to see her. In fact, he smiled and stepped aside to let her in. The door shut behind them, and just like that, my wife was inside another man's home. I reviewed the pictures I had taken, knowing they would be important later. I didn't go to the house, didn't call her, didn't create a scene. I just sat there, staring at the place where everything seemed to be falling apart, realizing that the reality of my marriage slipping away was undeniable. After a while, I started my car and drove back home, silent and heavy with the weight of what I had just discovered. Audrey came back later that evening, acting as if everything was fine. That was the part that had hit hardest. Her ability to walk back in, acting completely normal, as if nothing had changed. That was when I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The game had gone on long enough. I needed to confront her, get answers, and stop pretending this wasn't happening. I called her into the living room, making sure my voice was steady. She sighed, clearly irritated, but sat down. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes never left me, like she had more important things to do, like she didn't have to deal with me at all. I took a deep breath, gathered my courage, and said, I need you to end whatever it is going on with him, or we're done. That's it. No shouting, no threats, just the truth. She shook her head in disbelief. What are you talking about? There's nothing going on, she said, her voice flat and dismissive. I pulled my phone from my pocket, turned the screen toward her, and showed her the pictures. There they were, clear shots of her walking into his house, laughing together. I could see the moment her eyes flickered. Just for a second, her guilt was visible. But then, like flipping a switch, the expression changed. The guilt faded, replaced with something sharper. Anger. You followed me, she snapped, her voice rising. Are you stalking me now? You don't trust me, so now you're spying on me? That's messed up, Nick. I felt my insides freeze. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't remorseful. She wasn't even surprised. Instead, she twisted everything, turning it around and making me out to be the bad guy for uncovering the truth. I stood up, nodded quietly, and said, okay, I wasn't going to argue. She had already made her choice, and I had made mine. The next week passed in a cold silence. We lived under the same roof, but there was no connection between us anymore. No casual chats, no fake smiles, just two people coexisting in the same house, waiting for something to give. She didn't try to explain herself, didn't try to make it right, and I knew she wasn't about to stop seeing him. I wasn't going to beg her to stay loyal. That wasn't love. That was desperation, and I wasn't desperate. So, while she carried on with her pretense of normalcy, I took quiet steps to free myself from this marriage. I met with a lawyer, started the process of divorce. If she wanted to be with him, so be it, but she wouldn't drag me down with her. The next morning, as I got ready for work, Audrey surprised me. I was halfway through buttoning my shirt when she calmly said, I'm making you dinner tonight. I paused, my fingers frozen over the last button. The words didn't quite register at first. Audrey hadn't cooked for me in months, not since things started falling apart. Lately, she barely acknowledged my existence, unless it was to be cold or indifferent. So why, out of nowhere, did she want to make dinner? I turned to look at her. She was standing by the dresser, scrolling through her phone, but something about the situation felt off. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to see if she'd follow up, maybe offer an explanation, but she didn't. All right, I said finally, keeping my voice neutral. If this was some kind of mind game, I wasn't going to reveal my hand first. As I left for work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Was she feeling guilty? Was this a peace offering or a setup for some kind of excuse? A final act before she pulled away for good? What she didn't know was that I had already taken steps to free myself. The divorce papers were ready, tucked away in a folder, waiting for the right moment. But that wasn't all. I had something else that would change everything. While she'd been sneaking around with her secret lover, I had been getting closer to someone too, her best friend. It started off as casual talks, just small moments of shared frustration about Audrey's behavior. But over time, it grew into something more. She knew exactly what Audrey had become, and she wasn't under any illusions about her. So if tonight's dinner was some sort of game, a move to make me beg or apologize for uncovering her secret, I wouldn't fall for it. I came home that evening, the smell of home-cooked food wafting through the air. It was the kind of scent I hadn't experienced in months. If this had been a few months ago, I might have been hopeful, maybe even excited, thinking it was a sign that she was trying to fix things. But I knew better now. Whatever this dinner was, it wasn't an olive branch. I sat down at the table, watching her as she moved with a strange grace, setting the plates, pouring the wine, and smiling, her eyes never meeting mine. We ate mostly in silence. She didn't ask about my day, and I didn't ask about hers. The only sounds were the clink of silverware against porcelain and the occasional sip of wine, but the tension between us could have been cut with a knife. It felt like there was a third presence at the table, hovering in the air between us. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down and locked eyes with her. She was too calm, too collected, a woman who had already made her decision. I leaned back slightly and asked, "So, have you ended things with him?" She didn't flinch. There was a subtle smirk on her face, as if she had anticipated this moment. Then, then she delivered the words, "I'm leaving you." I exhaled slowly. The words no longer carried the weight they once would have. There was a time when those words would have shattered me, when I would have pleaded for her to stay, to reconsider. But now they were the punctuation mark on a story that I should have closed a long time ago. I smiled, genuinely. Then I stood, walked into the bedroom, and returned with a neat stack of papers. I placed them in front of her and slid them across the table. "Perfect," I said, my voice controlled. "I've already prepared the papers. Sign them." For the first time that night, her composure faltered. She hadn't expected this. She stared at the papers, then back at me, searching for any reaction she could use against me. But there was nothing, only calm. And then the doorbell rang. She shot a quick glance at the door, clearly not expecting anyone. Me? I'd been waiting for this moment. I rose from the table, taking my time to approach the door, and opened it. There, standing in the doorway with a quiet confidence, was Audrey's best friend, the woman who had been by my side through the unraveling of my marriage, the woman I had grown closer to ever since I realized my marriage was over. I stepped aside and gestured toward her. "Meet my new girlfriend." The look on Audrey's face was priceless. It wasn't just shock. It was betrayal, disbelief, perhaps even a little regret. She had forgotten that when you play games, you better be ready to lose. Audrey didn't take it well. Once she realized I had beaten her to the punch, she snapped. The cool, calm facade melted away, and she erupted. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. Her silence turned into fury, and she hurled accusations at me, calling me every name she could think of. But I didn't engage. There was no need to. My part in this was done. The papers were on the table, and now it was her turn to decide. Sign them or let the court decide for us. At first, she pretended to be fine with it. She put on a front, claiming she just wanted to move on, but I knew her well enough to see through it. As soon as the reality hit, she became the woman I always feared she could be: spiteful, vengeful, determined to destroy everything in her path. It wasn't about our marriage anymore. It was about hurting me. She went to court and painted herself as the victim. She claimed I had been controlling, emotionally abusive, and isolated her from her friends. She accused me of trapping her in the marriage, of making her feel worthless. She even fabricated stories to make me out to be the villain. And the worst part? Some people actually believed her. That's the thing with lies. If you tell them with enough conviction, they start to sound like the truth. But I wasn't about to let her rewrite history. When my turn came, I let the facts do the talking. I had the photos of her sneaking into her lover's house. The text messages clearly showing this wasn't just some innocent friendship. And then there were the financials, bank statements that proved she had been using our joint account to fund her affair. My lawyer made sure every detail was laid out, every transaction linked back to her betrayal. But the real blow came when we talked about the emotional toll. For months, I had felt like I was losing my mind, questioning myself, doubting my worth. My lawyer argued that the mental strain she had put me through, her lies, her gaslighting, her betrayal, had taken a massive toll on my well-being, and the court listened. When the final verdict was delivered, I could see the defeat in Audrey's eyes. The judge split our assets, but thanks to the evidence I had, I walked away with most of what I had worked for. She didn't get to take everything like she had hoped. She thought she could ruin me, but in the end, she had only exposed herself. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. You might expect that after everything, I'd feel complete, satisfied even, but the truth is, no one walks away from something like this unscathed. I moved on. That's what I told myself, at least. Audrey's best friend and I started seeing each other. She had been there through the whole mess. She knew how Audrey treated me, and unlike my ex-wife, she actually seemed to appreciate me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter who I was with, I'd always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. You don't go through something like this without it changing you. I've learned that trust isn't something you just give, it's earned. And once it's broken, it doesn't just snap back into place the way it used to. Could I ever trust someone enough to get married again? Right now, I honestly don't know. It's not that I don't want to. It's just that I can't quite picture love the same way. It's like when you touch a hot stove as a kid, you get burned once, and you flinch every time you get near the heat. And trust me, I got burned badly. In the end, I came to a realization. The people we trust the most are often the ones who hurt us the deepest. And when they do, the best form of revenge isn't anger. It's not trying to get even. It's not wasting your energy hating them. No, the best revenge is moving on, thriving, becoming someone they'll never have again, and making sure they regret losing you every single day. Believe me, Audrey regretted it. and that's enough for me. So, that's my story. A crazy one, I know, but that's life, right? You think you know someone, you build a life together, and then one day, they toss it all aside like it never mattered. But here's the thing, I didn't let it break me. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, don't let it break you either. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think I handled it the right way? Was there something I should have done differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, if something feels wrong in your relationship, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking real-life stories like this. See you in the next one.